do you expect to retrieve them when we don't have any Earthbound operatives left?
Hello and welcome to another episode of A Brief History. Today's episode, Crash Bandicoot. Ready, set, go!
September 9th, 1995. After a failed collaboration with Nintendo to create a CD-ROM add-on to the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, electronics company Sony decided to go out on their own and create an original gaming console. What resulted from this nasty breakup was the Sony PlayStation, a CD-based 32-bit powerhouse that went on to ship over 100 million units and launch one of the most successful line of gaming consoles ever created. Meanwhile, Nintendo was chatting up another electronics company called Philips and woke up the next morning with a strange itch in their pants.
But such a massive legacy has to start somewhere, and for PlayStation it all began with a little game known simply as Crash Bandicoot. A pioneer of its genre, Crash Bandicoot was a 3D platformer developed by Naughty Dog Inc., distributed by Universal Interactive Studios, and released on August 31st, 1996. Crash featured pretty much everything gamers had come to expect from 2D platformers up to that point: running, jumping, stompable enemies, linear levels, boss battles, breakable boxes, power-ups, and collectible items that granted extra lives. However, the biggest difference was that in this game you did it all in 3D!
Essentially, Crash Bandicoot took the concept of 2D platforming levels a la Super Mario Bros. And flipped the perspective to take place directly behind the main character, a perspective shift that was codenamed Sonic's ass! Perspective shift aside, Crash Bandicoot was pretty much a standard platformer, but what really made it stand out was its challenging design and memorable main character, Crash, a deranged anthropomorphic orange Bandicoot created by the evil Dr. Neo Cortex. After his creation, Crash formed a bond with another creation from Cortex, a female Bandicoot named Torna. Not being up to Cortex's standards, Crash was soon taken away from Torna, and Crash managed to escape from Cortex's fortress. After drifting around and winding up at Insanity Beach, it was now Crash's job, and therefore your job, to platform through level after level in an attempt to reunite with your beloved furry dream and stop Cortex's evil plans.
Crash Bandicoot went on to sell well over 6.8 million units and received very positive scores from reviewers across the board. The majority of praise was given to the game's graphics and design, while the main point of criticism was the game's lack of innovation. But nevertheless, Crash Bandicoot was still a massive hit game that helped put PlayStation on the map, and Naughty Dog were not about to let this opportunity pass them by. They immediately began to work on a follow-up to Crash, and just over a year later, on October 31st, 1997, Crash Bandicoot 2 Cortex Strikes Back was released for the PlayStation 1. Crash 2 expanded and refined almost every aspect of its predecessor with smoother animation and improved save function, higher quality graphical and lighting effects, analog control compatibility, and more varied gameplay, all while maintaining the same feel and style of the original. This improved formula earned Crash 2 even higher review scores and essentially solidified Crash's spot as the PlayStation's unofficial mascot. That rhymed a little bit, kinda.
And the story was pretty much exactly the same for the next game in the series. Crash Bandicoot Warped, released for the PS1 exactly 1 year after Crash 2 on October 31st, 1998. Where this game didn't change near as many things as Cortex Strikes Back, it did include just enough new features to keep things fresh, including a Mega Man style power-up system after killing bosses to earn new abilities, flying levels, racing levels, underwater levels, and jet ski levels. Not to mention animal riding levels in which you could play as Crash's sister Coco, and that's only scratching the surface. With multiple gems, crystals, relics, bonus stages, and time trials to work with, Crash Warped offered incredible replay value and once again earned even higher reviews than the games before it.
So by 1999, Naughty Dog had successfully created one of the most popular series of platformers of the 1990s, and even created the first Crash spin-off game, Crash Team Racing, a PS1 kart racer heavily inspired by the Nintendo 64 title Diddy Kong Racing. And it was at this time in their career that Naughty Dog wanted to start developing games for Sony without having to go through Universal Interactive. But since Universal Interactive still owned the rights to the Crash series, the only way Naughty Dog could develop games for Sony in their own right was to stop making Crash Bandicoot games. Which was exactly what they did, moving on to launch multiple more hit game franchises like Jak and Daxter, Uncharted, and The Last of Us. But where did that leave our favorite marsupial Crash?
Well, in terms of the main series, the world wouldn't see another Crash Bandicoot game until 2001 with Crash Bandicoot Wrath of Cortex. Are you ready for this? Because this one gets complicated. Wrath of Cortex was released for the PlayStation 2 on October 29th, 2001, the Xbox on April 15th, 2002, and for the GameCube on September 17th, 2002. All three of these versions were published by Universal Interactive Studios, but the PS2 and Xbox versions were co-published by Konami and developed by Traveler's Tales, where the GameCube version was co-published by Vivendi Universal Games and developed by Eurocom. You follow that? Good, me neither.
Anyway, for a next-generation game, Crash Bandicoot Wrath of Cortex took an incredibly safe approach to its design, keeping things more or less in line with what was established in Crash Warped while adding in some new challenges, gameplay modes, and characters. And this approach was reflected in the game's review scores. Wrath of Cortex received pretty mixed reviews across its three versions, with most critics singling out the fact that Crash's formula hadn't really changed at all since 1996 and was starting to get stale. So Traveler's Tales took this criticism and ran with it, taking the next few years to overhaul the Crash formula.
But gamers still got their Crash fix during these years with a side series of 2D platformers on the Nintendo Game Boy Advance, starting with 2002's Crash Bandicoot The Huge Adventure, or Crash Bandicoot XS in Europe, followed by Crash Bandicoot 2 Entranced in 2003, and capped off with Crash Bandicoot Purple Ripped as Rampage, a 2004 minigame compilation that crossed over with the universe of fellow PS1 platformer series Spyro the Dragon in its companion release, Spyro Orange The Cortex Conspiracy. Although in Europe, both of these games were simply renamed to Fusion. Much easier if you ask me. All of these games were developed by Vicarious Visions and received generally positive reviews, excluding Crash Purple and Spyro Orange, whose responses were mixed.
So things were going pretty well for Crash on the GBA, but fans couldn't help but wonder what was next for the Bandicoot's next home console outing after the mixed response to Wrath of Cortex. Luckily, they didn't have to wait too long, for on August 30th, 2005, 2004, Traveler's Tales and Vivendi Universal Games released Crash Twinsanity for the PlayStation 2 and Xbox. At the time of its release, Twinsanity was without a doubt the most unique game in the entire core Crash series due to its laundry list of changes and new additions to the established Crash formula.
Where all 4 of the previous Crash games took place on linear paths, Twinsanity brought Crash into the realm of open-world 3D platforming with occasional linear levels sprinkled in. And while this seemed like a natural progression of the series, what was a little bit more out of the box with the multiple new styles of gameplay.
While yes, you do play as Crash throughout the majority of the game, you could also now play as series antagonist Dr. Neo Cortex, and what really set this game apart was the ability to play as both Crash and Cortex at the same time. Whether they're running along holding hands or pounding each other's faces in, Crash and Cortex have to work together as a team in order to get through a large amount of the game's levels, offering a wide variety of new moves.
And if we take a look at the back of the game box, we find all of these moves have clever little names, including the Twin Slam, the Humilis Skate, the Twin Throw, the Roller Brawl, the Spank, and the... Oh my.
In addition to Crash and Cortex's singular and team-based levels, you could also play as Dr. Cortex's niece Nina in levels that involve wall climbing and using Nina's mechanical arms.
So Traveler's Tales have pretty much covered all the majority of criticism dealt to Wrath of Cortex. And while many critics recognized and praised the game for this, as well as its humor, Crash Twinsanity's aggregate review scores were actually lower than those of Wrath of Cortex, ranking an average of 64 to 69% across both versions of the game. And following this unfortunate response, after 8 years of running, jumping, and spinning around like a maniac, the world's favorite hyperactive marsupial went into a main series hibernation. It wasn't until 3 years later, in October of 2007, the world would be greeted with a new Crash Bandicoot game in the form of Crash of the Titans.
This time around, Crash's new adventure was helmed by developers Radical Entertainment, published by Sierra, and released for PlayStation 2, Xbox 360, Nintendo Wii, Game Boy Advance, Nintendo DS, and PSP, although the handheld versions were developed by different studios. Now, unlike Crash Twinsanity, which shook up the Crash Bandicoot series within the bounds of the established Crash formula, Crash of the Titans completely threw out that formula and started from scratch, aiming to reinvent the Bandicoot with new design and gameplay. So rather than being a straightforward platformer, Crash of the Titans was a more action-adventure style game with both platforming and beat-em-up elements, including the ability to take control of large beasts known as Titans and wreak havoc.
In addition to this, Titans also made many aesthetic changes to Crash, including new collectibles, enemies, and most notably character design. Crash, Coco, Cortex, and all the rest of the main series cast were given complete makeovers while still maintaining their recognizable designs. Except for bloody Aku Aku! My god, what on earth happened here?
I genuinely thought this was a completely different character when the game started, and how was I supposed to know? He looks completely different and they never call him by his name in the opening, so I was perfectly safe in assuming that this quasi-reboot of the series was just throwing weird new characters at me from the word go. Also, in this game, Aku Aku is voiced by Grimm from Billy and Mandy.
I will deal with them. I have been fighting evil for many centuries. Look at this ding-dong mess. Everything is all sticky. Man, I hope you don't expect me to clean up all this filth.
I like it.
Crash of the Titans was only slightly better received than Twinsanity, getting a generally mixed response overall. But despite this, the game eventually saw a 2008 sequel known as Crash Mind Over Mutant.
The story for Mind Over Mutant was very much the same as Titans. The game was released for PS2, Xbox 360, Wii, DS, and PSP. Radical Entertainment handled the console versions, while the handheld games were tackled by other developers, and the game saw pretty mixed reviews across the board. And unfortunately, that's about it. Outside of its main series, Crash has had 2 party games, 3 kart racers, and a handful of mobile games. But other than that, the Crash Bandicoot series has been completely dormant since the release of Mind Over Mutant.
After being dropped by Naughty Dog, Crash found himself constantly jumping between different developers and in the process constantly moving further and further away from his roots. And while that's not a bad thing at all, it's impossible to say that Crash's post-Naughty Dog games haven't performed poorly compared to the originals. But even with a handful of arguably underwhelming games, Crash is still a beloved icon who helped shape an entire new generation of gaming, and interest in the Bandicoot hasn't faded a bit.
Over the past few years, there have been rumor after rumor about Crash coming back in some form, even to the point of Naughty Dog themselves expressing interest in regaining the rights and revitalizing the franchise.
It's impossible to predict the future of Crash Bandicoot. I mean, no one knows if we'll actually see another game in the franchise. But even if we don't, that doesn't change the fact that this series helped set the standard for the world of 3D gaming. And while it may not have completely revolutionized the industry like Super Mario 64, the Crash Bandicoot series was a fun, engaging, and awesome experience that is still being talked about to this day. And after almost 20 years, I think that speaks for itself. Thanks for watching, guys. DFTBA. Greetings and salutations, everybody, and thanks so much for watching this video, and special thanks to Ryder as well. Thank you so much for the opportunity to work with you, because this was so much fun to do. Fun fact, by the way, everybody, yes, what you just heard, my voice, that was slowed down. What resulted from this nasty breakup was the Sony PlayStation, a CD-based 32-bit powerhouse that went on to ship over 100 million units and launch one of the most successful line of gaming consoles ever created. What you want to make of that, I have no idea. But anyway, if you want to see more of my stuff and look at my hideous face and hear my horrendous voice, you can have a look at my Crash Team Racing video that I did. I was going to direct you guys to my Crash Bandicoot Trilogy retrospective, but the problem with that is that those videos are so old and so badly done and just so embarrassingly cringeworthy, I couldn't bring myself to. Search them up if you dare, but I'm not going to direct you to them. I'm going to direct you to one of my more recent videos, Crash Team Racing. I was going to say the rude word in the middle, but can't do it on this channel. I think it's a family-friendly channel, so I'm not going to swear. Thanks very much.
Ryder, I hate you.